Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the People Overview Scrutiny Committee. Please note that this meeting has been live streamed and recorded. Please also note that all remote participants are muted at the outset of the meeting and are only able to speak at the invitation of the chair. Please raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak, and then only unmute when the chair invites you to make your contribution. As chair, I may ask if you are muted if you do not participate in this way. Item 1 is apologies for absence is Claire Wilde, Duncan Kerr, and substituting is Julian Dean. Kevin Turley, Kevin Pardy, substituting is Caroline. Caroline here? Oh, she's there, sorry. And Sean Lyons. Yes.
Chair, can I also give apologies that I'm going to have to step out for another meeting just before 10:30 for probably about 30 minutes. So sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just feel I ought to mention Councillor Pardy is still not well, and I'm sure we'd all wish to send our thoughts to his family and himself. We do miss him very much, being lively. Okay. Any disclosable pecuniary interest? Hilary?
Yes, I run a children's nursery, childminders.
Minutes of the meeting held on, sorry.
Yes, Chair, disclosing that I'm a trustee of Learning Disability Charity, Bethergy, and the grandson attends Sevendale Academy.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November? All okay?
Sorry, Chair, can I just query on the agenda? It says the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of July be confirmed an accurate record.
Sorry,
Am I looking at the right thing?
Just checking the minute date. It's correct online.
It's correct online, 27th of November. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Public question time, we have none, and member question time, we have none. So we'll go on to item 6, children's participation and impact strategy. Vanessa is not here today, so I think, Siobhan, it's over to you. If you'd like to explain who you are.
Yes, so I am Siobhan Hughes and I am the Service Manager for Early Help and Children's Services in Shropshire. So thank you for allowing us to come today to present the participation strategy. We have a lot of responsibilities in relation to participation for children. It's set out in the UN Convention for Children. We've now have statutory duties around participation and hearing the voice of young people right across children's services. And Ofsted have recently, in our past 2 inspections, or past 3, have said to us that they can see we've got plans in train, but we've got some work to do in ensuring that we allow children or make it possible for children to participate in the way that we would like. It's not just about statutory responsibility. We really are passionate about children and young people being at the heart of everything that we do, and that they are able to influence the decisions that are made about them on a day-to-day basis with their social worker, with the people that care for them and love them, but also influencing big decisions that are made about the services that are provided to them. Historically, we've had some really good approaches to participation in Shropshire. And people talk to me a lot about things that we used to do that worked really well. And some of those we don't do anymore for different reasons. And some of them we would like to really bring back. We've got some excellent pockets of practice across Shropshire. Sorry, that's a lack of water. So children's services. So recently we've had a young person who's co-chaired a corporate parenting panel. We've got some excellent work going on in the virtual school where they've helped young people to create a children in care council. They've done a takeover of the conference for the virtual school, and actually they've presented and taken part in a training exercise nationally for all head teachers. So there's some really great stuff that's going on already in Shropshire. We've also got young people who came to like key meetings such as DMT, so our senior management team for children's services, and we've had young people come and speak at council meetings, and I think that voice has really been heard, which has been excellent. And we've also got some excellent work going on within the community with young people. So we've got a recent example of the work that's taking place with the Town and Parish Council in Market Drayton, where young people have worked with the Parish Council to really improve the skate park there, and their voice has been really heard, and we've got a little film about that we'd like to share in the future. We're really ambitious about thinking about how young people are involved in the future about decision making. So we really want to make sure that we've got the right levers and mechanisms in place to allow them to do that. So if you're a young person sitting in a school and you're not involved in children's services, or you don't have a social worker, or if you do have a social worker and you are looked after, that it's really clear how you can get involved in decision making, and that you can get involved at any level, just even a little bit to share your views, or actually to become much more active around that and take part in some of the forums that we've got here in Shropshire. We are going to be presenting the youth strategy in the future to full council, and this is a key part of that. We surveyed over 2,000 young people previously, and they were really clear about their views, that they love Shropshire and they love where they live and they love each other and communities individually. They just want more to do and more activities to take part in. So this is absolutely key, that we hear that voice and we put the right things in place. So you will be asking why we're here today. So as we've said in our paper, we would love for the Scrutiny Committee to agree our participation strategy and endorse this approach of working in a way that involves young people right at the beginning of decision making about their day-to-day lives, but also thinking about a much more democratic structure that almost mirrors the democratic structure of the council. We want to create a council for young people, and sometimes referred to as a youth parliament, where we can vote young people in from different areas right across Shropshire, and we would like that to feed into the executive management team of the council and to councillors as well. So we would really like for Scrutiny to endorse that approach. It will take a bit of time to set up and a bit of work, but that is our ambition. Also, we would really like for Scrutiny to be able to help us to ensure that there's accountability in this approach, and that there is scrutiny, and that we are able to make sure that it actually happens, and that when young people are able to share their voice and their opinions, but also that is heard by the local authority.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Ruth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm really interested in the involvement of young people with Market Drayton Town Council, and think this is an initiative that could be easily implemented across the whole of Shropshire, and with great benefit. But I also note in the report that the existing resources would be used to include or to develop young people being included in initiatives and in decision making. With Market Drayton, were there any costs, and if how do they cover those costs, whether the town council or through grant funding? And do young people then need some mentoring as part of that sort of development and taking part in local government at the lowest level? And I think there's quite a lot there to unpick, and I think it'd be really good to have a lot more information about that initiative to cascade across Shropshire. Could make a big impact.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just getting used to the microphone, but yeah, I think that's a really good point. We have used our existing resource, and obviously the funding that was made available in Market Drayton. We've got 2 young people who are members of Parliament for Shropshire. It's funded by the National Lottery, and the arrangements for that, where young people are mentored really and supported to take part in this democratic work, is coming to an end. So there are some questions about how that's going to be presented in the future, and that's so absolutely. We started that conversation with YSS yesterday, who support SYA, I'll say that back to front, about who'd support those young people, and we absolutely need to raise that, I think. So they've got some ideas about how we could work in partnership with the voluntary sector and national organisations to mentor these young people and organise and support them to take part.
Julian?
Thank you. Similarly to the point about market rate, in Shrewsbury, we have the Shrewsbury Town Council already has a youth council. So I'm just interested in how that's being engaged with in terms of this whole process. As I understand it, currently there's a statutory duty for youth services in general, but a lot of that is effectively devolved, and much of it through the town parish council. So you know, does that work? Is my question, I suppose, which may go beyond this paper. I realise that. And then the final question is just in terms of the Lundy principles, or you know, what if you want, you know, if you're telling somebody on the bus for 1 minute, what will that change about what we do applying those principles?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of parts. So I'll just answer the first one around I think when our youth strategy comes to council, you know, we'll explore this in a bit more detail. However, statutory duties are changing nationally, and they are working on a national youth strategy. And part of that includes participation, but it really puts a lot of emphasis on the local authorities' responsibilities in relation to youth, which are much more than what they've been previously. So we think that the town councils do a great job in providing youth spaces to young people, and obviously they're commissioned out, and they're local to the area, and they meet a lot of young people's needs in that area. What we find a bit more difficult is about your young people who wouldn't normally attend a youth club, a traditional youth club, and that is the work that the detached youth team really are trying to establish. So that's our council detached youth team, which alongside the statutory duties. So we're a wee bit ahead of what's been put out nationally, because we've already got a detached youth team who are out listening to our young people and doing that work in the area. So they supported the young people to work with the town council and market rating. So we absolutely, I think we've got to wait on the new direction coming, but we've already got, you know, the outline of that, and what we've talked about with SYA, who support the youth forums, is that we've actually got a number of forums going on in Shropshire. So we've got the Children in Care Council that the virtual school are leading on, and we've got other forums that young people contribute to, and what we've got to do is bring that together, so that we can hear that voice collectively, and that all young people are represented and feed into the democratic structures. And I know that Nick Bardsley attends some of is the nominating member who attends the work that goes on with the young people who are our Shropshire MPs and Youth Forum as well. We secondly, in terms of the Lundy model, what we want to do is we want to create more spaces for young people to be heard. So that is absolutely key. So we haven't had that. COVID had a massive impact on how, you know, the work that we were in train with, and some of that had really naturally grown by people who were really passionate about this type of work, and it derailed it, and it put it online. And actually what young people are telling us is they don't want to do things online. They don't want to meet online. They want to meet face to face, which is a big surprise for us. So they say, you know, after school, that's too much. We want to actually get together and talk. So we are creating more of those opportunities. We're listening to young people about what type of spaces that they want, because there's no point in putting something on and nobody comes. So we are really working on that. And I think for young people, what they say to us when we do this type of work, and when we've done it in the past, is that, yeah, but you don't do anything with it. And what we need to make sure is that actually when young people are telling us, giving us their views, which are quite often the same as what we are thinking, but just, you know, more innovative, they will, you know, that we are saying, right, okay, we've heard that, this is what we are doing about that now. And that's why we want the forums to feed into a bigger sort of youth parliament, youth council, that then feeds into our democratic structures.
Hilary?
Okay. It's really good what you're doing with the market rate and in the market towns, but what's your aspirations for reaching out to the children in the more rural, living on the rural farms? How are you planning on bringing those children in to be able to have access? And will you have space? You know, because I work with children and they want space. They don't necessarily always want to have activities organised for them. They just want to have a safe space where they can do their own things, but it's safe. So how are you thinking of bringing that together, particularly the rural children, the ones really out? Because there's a lot all around Shropshire that are hard to reach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we've done is we've created a project board called the Impact and
Sorry, can you
a project board.
yeah.
That will run for 12 months initially. It's chaired by our Assistant Director for Services to Children, Vanessa Gray. And what that's doing is it's bringing initially internal resources together to look at how we can embed this the participation strategy, because just having it as a document isn't going to make it work. So we've got a number of work streams of that. What we've realised is that we cannot do that on our own. So we're going to have to work with our partners to see how we can work together to create more opportunities. So our next meeting of the Impact Project Board will be bringing in partners, including health, to think about how can we, and organisations that work with SEND children, to think about how can we broaden this out to make sure that we're inclusive of all children. It's a massive challenge in Shropshire. We've recently did a peer review in Oxfordshire, who've got some of these same challenges as well. So we learned quite a bit from them. Our youth support team manager went there, Helena Williams, and so it will create a challenge, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. So what we need to do is look at what best practice there is in other local authorities and then get people together to make it happen. What our young people absolutely, I cannot say this strongly enough, but they talk to us about absolutely that they love the areas that they live in. And I was thinking, when I was a teenager, I probably wouldn't have said that, but that's not what they said to us. They said to us they love their areas they live in. They just want absolutely what you're saying there, more space and more activities. So I think we've got to listen to them about what they want. And the Market Rate and Skate Park is a really good example of that. But there are other little areas in Shropshire where young people are gathering together really positively. They're not causing any bother. They just want that space to be able to get together. So yeah, it's a challenge we're thinking about every day or every time that we meet, and I think we've got to work together to address it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems is for them also to get to activities like the clubs, the different clubs. So for older people, we have the pickup, the bus that goes around and picks them up. If we could get something set up, I know it's going to cost money, but something that's set up for the children in the evenings, perhaps when those same buses could be used to take them home and drop them off, as we do for the older residents. It's just an idea.
I think it's a great idea. So it'd be really, it's one of the things I can talk to. Perhaps we could get transport and to have that conversation with them and ask them to join the board. And that was a good idea. Thank you.
Ruth?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I really think this is the way forward for the council and to involve young people. But we have lost youth clubs in many rural areas. In my division, we rely heavily on grant funding, which has to be renewed each time for something different. This would fit the bid we're working on. But once children finish school, some of them travel, 40 minutes by bus. If they miss that bus, they don't get home and rely on parents. It's a real challenge. And I think Councillor Luff has really hit that nail on the head, because it's a big challenge for rural areas to do anything outside school times where pupils relying on bus services, school bus services. And I think that's, if we can overcome that, then this really opens up and is a good opportunity to implement it.
Are you coming back on the same one? Because Ken, I've got Caroline. Yeah.
My daughter lives in Luxembourg, and they have a bus, and it's very rural in Luxembourg as well, the same size as Shropshire, the whole country, and they have what they call a bumble bus, and the parents actually book the bumble bus, and they have to pay, it's not a lot, and it picks them up from school and takes them to their different clubs, and then they book to bring them home, and it just goes all around. It's just something they do over there, just to consider. And parents are happy to pay for the bus because it means the children are being transported safely.
I've never heard of that before, and it sounds fabulous. Even as a parent, it sounds good to me. So yeah, it's something we'll definitely look into.
Caroline?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just commenting on the bus situation. I represent Broseley, and the majority of our young people are at school in Much Wenlock, and it's very difficult for them to socialise in Much Wenlock after school and that sort of thing, so that they, because they need to be able to get home. Many millions of years ago, when I was at school, there was a minibus service using the school minibuses. There was one at 6 and one at 9. And they would, you'd book yourself on it, and they would deliver us home. And for those of us who lived in rural areas, it made a huge difference. It meant that we could socialise with friends, we could take part in activities that weren't otherwise available to us. And so maybe going back to something along those lines, maybe using volunteer drivers, who knows? But I think there's something to be said for looking into that. And just on the sort of engagement thing with the young people, we set up a project with SYA, which unfortunately was very unsatisfactory, and we had to call a stop to that. But we had input from outreach workers, which was very successful, and they really made a difference with the young people in our town who were sort of disaffected, weren't the sort of people who wanted to go to a youth club. They engaged with them and set up activities for them, and it was really valuable. And it came to an end just a couple of weeks ago, but we're very hopeful that the benefits will be long lasting. So I think it's very much something to be applauded. And just one very quick final thing is that we have a big project about to start in the spring to refurbish the play area in our main park, and what we're aiming to do is to involve young people of all ages in different aspects of the project. One of the things that we wanted to do is to get some of the older young people to engage with creating a quiet area with planting and so on. They had raised some money in memory of our local police officer who died on duty actually in Broseley, and they raised some money in his memory, and so we're hoping to use some of that money for the young people to plant this particular area, which then gives them ownership of it and protects it from damage to a certain extent. So there's so many benefits from working together that the whole community can benefit from. So yeah.
Brilliant. So great. Another really good example. I think the work that we need to include. Yeah.
Julian?
Sorry, that just prompted a thought, which I thought I might as well share at this point because it might be useful. I had a residents meeting in a new development where there is a play area. Now, as I understand it, play areas in new developments are designed taking into account the whole area, not just the estate. So, the age group that it will be designed for will take into account what is available elsewhere. But of course, right now we're in a situation where, by and large, the management of it will be by a private management company, which is paid into by the residents, and so there's a tension. And so some of the residents there were saying, well, how come people from outside the estate are using the play area? And I had to say, well, because it was designed in that way. This is the one for that particular age group, but other age groups can go somewhere else, including children from this estate. As I understand it, there's likely to be legislation changing some of these things, and I just think it might be worth just flagging up now if we can respond, because in reality, the better situation would be is if all these places were adopted by local councils. That isn't what's happening nowadays. But as the government is ramping up, it's claiming to be looking to build 1.5 million homes, there's going to be a lot of new estates and a lot of new play areas. And I just think it's perhaps something to flag up, to think about in terms of making sure that we integrate them properly into what's available across the whole town or wherever it might be. And we also look for more democratic control of it, including by children. So that might be something to think about.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good.
That perhaps could go to the environment and economic. Is that the one would it go to? where planning comes under. Yeah, could perhaps go to that committee for discussion. Any more comments? Well, the recommendations are that we agree the participation and impact strategy for young people and note the ambitions set out in the strategy. And we endorse the Council's commitment to ensuring that children and young people have influence over decisions and actions on services that affect them. Aware that this is the last meeting of this committee, and I think I'd like to have included in the training for the next committee all about this scrutiny, this strategy, sorry, wrong word, to be included in their work. So that they're going into committee knowing what we're looking for, you know, part of our legacy that you follow this on, keep going. Okay, everybody agree? Can I just suggest we just take a second's break for everybody to get a glass of water because it's quite warm in this room before we go into the next one. Okay. Oh, yes, okay.
Thank you. Tomorrow we've got the main council meeting in here for the first time, and it's going to be really packed in because I think it's usually typically 90 people. Can we make sure that water or whatever is provided for tomorrow?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Apologies to anybody listening for the noise. I'm afraid the floor is a little creaky. Item 7 is the performance monitoring report Q3. Over to our director, who's taking. Are you starting, Tanya?
So thank you very much, Peggy. And this is our normal quarterly report in terms of the work that's gone on in Q3 across adults, children, learning and skills. So as before, members, we'll take it through each area and then we'll pause for questions before we move on to the next area. The first area up is adult social care. So we're going to just ask Natalie and Michelle.
Hi, I'm Natalie McFawn. I'm the Assistant Director for Adult Social Care. I'm with Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Williams, Service Manager for Community Social Work.
So we'll walk you through, I'll walk you through the first half of the report for adults, and Michelle will go through the latter part. So the first bit of the report is around the deprivation of liberty safeguards. We have a deprivation of liberty safeguards team, and we've recently merged with the management structure of the safeguarding team. There are distinctions to those two areas, but we also think that the skill sets across that complex work, and we'd like to explore that further in the future. So it's fairly new, but we think that there's some opportunities there within that. Our safeguarding position has remained where we've got 0 wait lists, which is obviously what we want in adult social care in safeguarding. The team worked really well with the wider adult social care services and within the partnerships. By maintaining that stability within the demand, it's allowing us to start getting underneath some of the trends and the themes that we're seeing coming through. So, for example, we're starting to look a little bit deeper into domestic abuse. It's one of the higher reasons why we have referrals in for safeguardings. It's a national picture, but it's also, you know, what do we understand about our localised picture within that, and why people are presenting to us. So we're really excited to do this piece of work, because actually we did a really good piece of work in self-neglect before, when we started to see
presenting themes. We were able to do self-neglect guidance. So we're starting to think with partners about what we could potentially do around domestic abuse, but it has to start with understanding your story first. The deprivation of liberty safeguards team. So we have reported on this in the past. This is an area of pressure. It's interesting when you talk about localised data and performance, but you think of some of the national context to some of these areas. Deprivation of liberty safeguards, I'm sure you're aware, it is an area that's very pressured nationally. Demand far outweighs capacity. People were preparing for the liberty safeguard protections to come in. And it is an area that we locally have found very, very challenging. We've brought our wait list down, but it's an area of significant pressure, and I think scrutiny panel members need to be aware of that. We're looking at our 23 to 24 backlogs. We were able to address the 2022 backlogs, but there's still very high demand coming in currently while we're also trying to do that. So that period of reaching a stable position is very, very challenging. Teams such as, the areas that Michelle covers, which are the wider community social work teams, they try and support that team by having regular contact with care homes, checking if people's position has changed, if urgent priority has changed, and things like that, just so that we can be constantly reviewing people on those lists and making contact with those. Just moving on from that, just to note that in the past, referrals for deprivation of liberty safeguards have been higher in hospitals. It's sort of breaking even now with care homes in hospitals. So we have been doing some work with the hospitals around referrals and appropriateness of referrals, and that's a piece of work that we'll continue to do. But it's fairly even at the moment. Usually you would expect to see the referral levels higher in care homes. So again, that's just some of the work that we're trying to do to think about that demand coming through. Is that demand the right demand? And then thinking about our mitigations towards that and how we manage that as a service. Moving on, if I touch on the occupational therapy service. Occupational therapy came over to us in August last year. Another area of significant challenge. As a council, we wanted to review the service to see where it should sit. And I'm really happy that the service is with adult social care at the moment. But I was very aware that before we were able to really get underneath what we think the opportunities are with our occupational therapy service and our wider adult social care service, that we were going to need to stabilise their position as well. And we were going to need to think about how we work differently in order to reduce those waiting lists. So since August, we've seen a 20% decrease in the waiting list. We put a number of mitigations in. Quite used to dealing with high demand in adult social care, as I'm sure you would expect. Some of those things are quite lightweight, actually. It's just about how you triage, how you look at your resource across in terms of demand coming in, how we're getting upstream in some of those areas. So we're happy to see the decrease, but there's a lot of work that we need to do still within this area. We're starting to look at, in adult social care, we have innovation weeks. So we're starting to think about, some of the work that we do at the front door with some of our other teams, how we can integrate the occupational therapy service into that. We've now got a fully recruited team, so that also helps with high demand. And we're also out to advert for a principal occupational therapist. So that's going to really support best practice, new ways of working, and really strengthen that offer, we hope, going forward. So moving on to hospital discharge. It's a pressured winter. Can't remember the last winter I said it wasn't a pressured winter in hospitals. I think that this has been the most successful, though, in terms of how demand and pressures have been managed. not just from us from a council perspective. I think this is the best I've seen partnership working in this area. Really pleased to see that our high performance in supporting people to go home was maintained over winter. Sometimes that's where you see a drop, that's where you see some more complexity coming through. We are supporting more complex discharges, so I've just highlighted within the report. We did some comparisons from 2022. So in 23, we were supporting 16% more complex discharges. When we did that same comparison in 24, it was 28% more complex discharges. So we're really wrapping around the new ways of working. We've got Care Transfer Hub with partners. That's promoting more multidisciplinary work and the right decisions happening at the earliest point within the hospital. So it's reducing escalation, and this is why I think it feels like we're in a really positive space with our partnership working at the moment. We know the system is pressured, but even within the tier 1 meetings, there's been a lot of positive feedback for the local authority in terms of the consistent improved performance in hospital discharge and all of the actions that we're doing to support the system. So I really feel that this is an area that's going from strength to strength. We're still really maximising our reablement capacity. And all of those opportunities that come with reablement, because we know that there's better outcomes for people when they have our reablement service. It was really interesting doing this report. We reflected on the last quarter that we'd used 118 less pathway 3 beds. So, you know, in the past we'd supported people in short-term nursing and residential placements. And that's so significant, because even though that was a piece of work that we set out to do, sometimes, you know, we're so in it when you actually start doing the report and you think, wow, we've actually achieved that. We've continued to support more people at home, which is generally where people want to be. We've done it through reablement, which is better outcomes, and we've seen that reduction in beds, and we're really starting to see that performance can continue. It's never an area I take my eye off because of system pressures, but I'm just really proud of the service for the work that they've done in this space.
Hilary, did you want a question on what she's been talking about?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about the deprivation of sleep. Yeah, going back to that. You talked about the challenges. Could you just enlarge on what those challenges are, just so that we can really understand, and maybe there'll be some way we can make recommendations to challenges.
Absolutely. So I think one of the highest challenges is the level of demand. We don't see probably the fluctuations in demand as we're trying to stabilise it. So if you look at some of our numbers on the waiting list, so yes, we've addressed the 2022 backlogs, but actually those referral levels are just continuing to come in. So really, if you see that figure of where the waiting list is, what you want to see is it come down. Actually, it did come down to the 926, but then it stayed static. I think the complexity of people that we're supporting that lack capacity, that are requiring residential and nursing care. We're starting to see that in the numbers of people coming through with dementia, for example, and all of that. If you think about our demographics and what that demand looks like, yes, nationally it's high demand, because that's what we've started to see. But in Shropshire, if you pull it all together, you think about the demographics, you see the increases in trends in things like dementia, people lacking capacity. You see the volumes coming through the hospitals and the pressures there. It really does feel like we tackle part of it, but then we've built this up. So that's why we've really tried to look at looking at casual hours, looking at how we increase support. If I'm being honest, it's easier sometimes in other areas of adult social care. So Michelle manages the community social work teams. So if there was a real issue with demand and pressure in one area, we could look at social workers supporting across. But it's specialist practitioners in their best interest assessors in this field. So you can't move your resource around in the same way So yeah, I think just those national trends, but also our localized demographics and what we're seeing coming through, and that complexity, it's not really giving us that breathing space really to try and address and bring it down.
Yeah, funding to get support.
Yeah,
and I'm not can't remember what it was, since 6 weeks or something like that. It's full file, isn't it?
6 weeks.
It is about 6
Up
weeks.
to.
So what I was, when that funding stops,
yeah,
what is the rate of the level of people then having to be readmitted into hospital because they're self-funding and they can't actually afford it? How is that affecting? Because just, I've been talking to some carers, and their concern is, I don't know whether you actually talk with the actual carers, not the people that, is that they see a lot of wastage in that some people are getting a lot of support paid for.
Yeah.
And a lot of extra hours that perhaps they don't really need this was there. But then they're going into other settings where people can't afford it and they're literally struggling just to find enough money to feed themselves. So obviously those are the ones which don't qualify for the extra funding, then ending up in hospital. I'm just trying to understand how we try and balance that.
Yes, I'll take that in a couple of parts then. So one of our metrics that we consistently perform high in is whether people are at home 91 days after discharge. For us, there's lots of reasons why people get readmitted to hospitals. The reason that we don't always look at the readmissions data is because there'll be a lot of those people that don't come our way. So it's a little bit misleading. So we look at the 91 days, and that really has been, even before my time, it's been something that Shropshire's consistently performed in. One of the reasons that makes that successful, and it sort of blends into your other question, this is why we look at reablement. So reablement really works on people's potential. So it's not that you just put a care package in, that's it, and you wait until somebody comes and reviews it. It's constantly, getting people up and moving and moving around. And actually, we talk about it being really good for outcomes, but it's also a very cost-effective way as well because you're working on people's potential. So that kind of supports the wider picture of not funding things inappropriately, because actually you've had skilled professionals really work with somebody. Yes, it's short-term intervention, but actually then be able to say to you at the end of it, this person doesn't need that now. They did on discharge, but actually they want us to go. They've had enough and they kind of want to carry on. So this is why when we look at our pathways, we have to look at that kind of overarching model for all of those points that you've mentioned within that. Now, not everybody can go through reablement. Some people are really, really complex. They're in hospital and it's very clear cut that they're going to need longer term care in hospital, and there'll be joint health and social care assessments within that to the assessment has to underpin the eligibility and what people need, and then we continue that review cycle to make sure that if needs have changed that we can adapt our approach and that provision.
Ruth, you've had a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going back to dolls, I think it's very good news that you address the people waiting since 2022, but did you do any sort of assessment on what the impact had been on those individuals having to wait so long? And why was the spike there, that big spike in 2024 in the chart on page 45? So the red rag in 23 was 131, but it shot up to 392 in 24.
Yeah.
I think that was when we looked at the way that we triage the referrals, and there was a significant change in the way that the team were practicing. So they re-evaluated how the referrals were coming in, how they were being triaged, the contact with the home. They set up a new duty system. So we did see a spike while some of that work was being evaluated, and we've changed the way that they're triaged now. So it's a more cohesive process with contact with the care home. They maintain contact. The dolls assessor will go in and do an initial visit within the first week if they need to, and make sure that the home have got what they need in place to ensure they're meeting the needs of the individual if they are making attempts to leave, etc. So I think it's that relationship building between the dolls team and the care homes at the point of the referral coming into the team that's improved. Hence those numbers have changed because the way they're being rag rated is different.
Okay, so our first question around the impact on individuals, how was that addressed? Was that dolls team going into care homes and managing or helping them manage those individuals?
The relationships start with the social workers that generally are mostly involved in placing the individual into the care home in the beginning. So they'll work really closely with the care home manager to identify any risks when they're going to be admitted around deprivation, so that the care home is prepared and they're making the referral into the dolls team straight away. And obviously we'll alert the care homes. The social workers involved will alert the dolls team if they know that there's going to be an admission, so that they're in front of it already. So they're making contact with the care home, making sure those referrals are being made. And the social worker will be in and out of that care home in the first few weeks of admission anyway, to review and monitor how care's going and making sure that the care home are meeting needs and they've got all the risks mitigated.
Thank you.
Yes. Carry on, Matthew. Fine. So last bit from me is just around mental health. So we've maintained zero wait list in our mental health service. We're trialling some new ways of working. So across a lot of our teams, we've got sort of hubs, front door hubs, early conversations with people, making sure that people have all the information and advice available to them. It doesn't necessarily look the same as it does within our community social work teams, because sometimes we hear about people through partnership working, people that are being discharged from hospital, etc. But we're trying to just see, is this an area that we could tap into? Because yes, I know we've got zero wait lists, but we often focus in mental health on the cohorts of people where there's more complexity. But actually, it's not that straightforward. There's lots of people that can be supported in different ways. So I really want us to be that progressive service that's thinking a little bit wider than just those that are more complex or those that are being supported under Section 117 aftercare. So, and also thinking about some people that are supported by maybe the community teams. Do they need the skill sets within the mental health team? And how are we kind of not just managing demand, because we can get really stuck in there, this is the waiting list and everything, and this is our world, but we've got to be keeping our finger on the pulse in thinking about being a progressive service that's getting upstream and supporting people in communities and really understanding that level of work. And we'll come on to a little bit more of that later when Michelle talks about the work in the community hubs. And just briefly then from me, so what we call the AMP team, so that's approved mental health practitioners. So they often do assessments for people that potentially might require detaining in hospital under the Mental Health Act. We've been doing a lot of work with partners around Section 13, and really this is about trying to make sure that when people are detained in hospital, that actually it really is the right decision, that we have explored least restrictive options, and that we're not jumping to those sorts of decisions. And we're starting to see it reflected in the report. We are starting to see a number of referrals that haven't progressed to a Mental Health Act assessment detention. And that really helps our conversations with partners also about the fact that we've got to really think about what that offer is in terms of supporting people. And I think you can really see, we reported on this the last time, but you can see the strength, of those 894 referrals, 658 were resolved. So, we've got to now think about, okay, maybe those people did need an assessment, but was it a Mental Health Act assessment that they needed? If you go all the way back to trialling the Let's Talk Local mental health, is there a space there that we can tap into and that we can do something a little bit more upstream? So hopefully when we come back, we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about what's happening in mental health. I'll hand over to Michelle. Michelle will just talk you through the headlines of the latter part of adults.
Okay, hello. So preparing for adulthood. So we've reported into committee before last time around PFA. So we're pleased to report we've still got a 0 wait list, and we've also reduced the age of allocation down to 17 from 17 and a half. And obviously there's plans to continue reducing those over the coming months. So some really great progress there. We've got a named worker approach. So we're getting involved with young people as soon as possible so we can start working with colleagues and children and the young person and their family, start making those plans as proactively as possible. We're continuing to see the same sort of trend around the level of needs and the types of needs coming through from children's. So kind of autism and learning disability being the highest trends really. So they remain unchanged. We're working really closely with children's services. We're continuing to meet with them. We've developed some new kind of regular touch meetings where we're talking about the young children that are due to be referred in, so we know about them as early as possible. So we're getting way ahead, and we understand what sort of resources that we're going to need to meet those young people's needs. So that's PFA. Coming on to learning disability. So we've established Let's Talk Local hubs in the last supporting period, so which follow the line of the rest of the community social work really. So they're community based, very much linked with the early help hubs that children's services and early help are offering. That's so that we're having those conversations again as early as possible in a community-based setting where people feel comfortable, and they're going to for that all family rounded approach and having really holistic conversations about what needs the young person might need as they become an adult. And we're continuing to work on developing those, linking with technology so that we can support development of independent life skills, what work opportunities they might need, so enable them involved in those family hubs as well, which is really a good development that's happening across the whole county slowly. So we're seeing improved outcomes across PFA and learning disabilities, with more individuals being supported with a direct payment to live independently in the community. So we've gone up to 180 individuals having a direct payment, which is a great increase over the last 12 months. So coming on to community social work. So contacts continue to show progress, that we're assessing people within 28 days. Generally around 74% of people are being assessed much sooner. We do still have a wait list, but it's much, much better than it was previously. I mean, over the last 12, 18 months, we've reduced that by around 64%, which is quite significant. So increases to signposting to external agencies as well. So we're having the right conversations earlier with people, signposting them off to supporting agencies that could help provide some support around, could be equipment or technology, it could be around voluntary sector service support in the community. So we're seeing improvements all around really. Community and family hubs is the real focus that we've been focusing on the last quarter. So we've got 5 developed already across the county, again working very closely with early help. They're embedded in friendly places to visit, so we've got kind of youth centres that are holding some of them, so that they're a safe place where people feel comfortable to attend, and they can go there and get advice from a number of different professionals and agencies. So it really helps to kind of have one conversation rather than have multiple conversations, and giving people the right advice and guidance as early as possible. That's really going to help us with our demand in the future as these develop. And just touching on your comment, Hilary, around frequent admissions to hospitals, as part of these community and based practices, we're also working really close with the ICB around MDT developments, proactive care, where we in particular talk about what they call frequent flyers. So those people that are in and out of hospital quite a lot, and what we're doing in the community to try and help and prevent that. Have they got the right support? Have they got the right networks in place? Are they in touch with the right agencies? So we talk about this at MDT, put plans in place, and they're monthly now, so they're much more frequent than they were. So we can make sure that everybody is wrapped around the individual as much as possible to prevent that where we can. Reviews, so we're at 66% currently across adult social care. Obviously, the more work we do at front door, the more people we're assessing sooner, the more people we're adding onto those review lists. But we continue to have as much focus as we possibly can, and we're in a much better position than what we were 12 months ago. And then if we go on to supported accommodation, so we continue to work at a strategic level with housing colleagues and partners around what our need is in the community for supported accommodation. As you know, Shropshire benchmarks very highly around supporting people in the community, and we continue to, that's our focus, always has been, always will be. We have commissioned a report with the Housing Learning Innovative Network to help us do a needs assessment so that we can understand, not just for learning disabilities and young people because they transition into adulthood, but for all areas really, what is the level of need around housing, which will help us inform where we're heading in the future really. We've got over 270 people supported in the community and supported living, primarily in Shrewsbury, and we're doing lots of work around accommodation across the rest of the county. We have got quite a few new schemes coming live in development over the next year or so, where we've got nomination rights. So we'll be working with people that were kind of new and existing residents where they need accommodation to see if they fit the criteria for those nominated properties as much as possible. Also capturing information around desired locations, so we can take that back and look at, okay, where do people want to be? What sort of accommodations they need, and make sure that we're meeting the needs of those people as much as we possibly can, taking into account properties that we've got available and what else might meet their needs as well. Okay. Carers. So the carers team continue to work very closely with adult social care. You'll see that most of their referrals come from the social work teams. Those relationships can continue to develop. They offer so much more as a Shropshire Carers group, and feedback from carers is significant, that they find them really, really helpful, really productive, that they are a great source of support and help. They're growing their social networking to bring carers together more as well. Carers registrations have significantly increased over the last year, and I think that's because we've got put more of a focus on carers. Carers is something we want to continue focusing on as we go forward into this year, especially with the rising numbers of dementia, and we've got quite a lot of older carers supporting generally their spouse with dementia, so that's one of our main focus areas for development this year. Okay.
Sorry.
Michelle, you mentioned that you have at the moment 5 community family hubs in Shropshire. Where are they?
They're in Highley, Bridgenorth, Oswestry, Ludlow, Abbey and Shrewsbury. And there's plans in place already for Market Drayton, Whitchurch, the new leisure centre. We've been to look at a space there, and we're working very close with public health around other local buildings that are just nice and welcoming for people to use, rather than using council buildings where people might feel that they don't want to come into.
What do you believe is your ultimate target in having hubs? Because at the moment, exactly what you described, North Shropshire isn't really covered. What is the ultimate plan? How many hubs would you like?
ideally we'd like them everywhere in as many communities as possible, so that we're reaching rural locations and now market towns as well.
Just to mention with that, I think everywhere is trying to look at that place-based arrangement, and what does place mean to people, and how that needs to meet the local needs as well. So, there might be discussions around, is that a hub? Does that need to look different? So we're working with partners at the moment. We've already expanded in terms of the hubs, but it's quite a wide system approach to this. So voluntary sector, lots of different activity going on in there. But I think that this is something that, as a system, we need to be thinking about, that constant development of place-based and what that means. So we're on that journey with that, but I think there's still a fair way to go. What we are seeing is that people are very receptive to it. People really like it. There's lots of opportunity around an all-age approach. People don't always need to be supported by statutory services. A lot of people don't want to be. So it's just about how we're meeting those needs locally. But yeah, we've got work to do in that, but it will all be part of that place-based arrangement here in Shropshire. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions going back to the occupational therapy section. Sorry, I should have interrupted the timely. It's really good on the OT recruitment, because they're very hard to find, so that's really good progress. But I'm interested in the disabled facilities grant, which I understand is with housing. My question is, when we have future reports, whoever on this scrutiny committee, would it be helpful to have some sort of progress against the DFG allocations with the way people are supported at home through occupational therapy? And there's obviously some sort of correlation, and one would hope that the DFG allocations would reduce the level of specialist ongoing support. And I think that's kind of, I'm not quite sure how you'd measure that, but I think that's kind of missing from this report, really. And then my other question is around preparing for adulthood and the early help hubs. Are advocacy services involved at that point for people?
So in terms of the occupational therapy point, I think you make a really good point, actually. We're starting to sort of get underneath this. So we've had the team with us in August, and if I'm honest, we've dived straight in, as we tend to do if there's a service that's got long waits and there's risk. So we've gone head first in. But actually, it's in terms of that longer term offer. I think that's a really good point, and we'll look at how we can weave that in to future. I'm glad you mentioned that. So
how you measure it, actually, I'm not quite sure.
It's a good question, and I will get back to you. I'll have a look at that. So yeah, that's with occupational therapy. With preparing for adulthood, sorry, could you?
Yes, I'm just questioning whether advocacy services are involved at that early stage or at a later point, really.
So in terms of developing that model, it's quite a new model at the moment, but we are including advocacy services more in the LD world. We were talking with Turning Point and trying to think about how we develop that model. But what we'd really like in terms of the hubs, we're trying to see how we can align it with the family hubs, but we're also trying to think about what presence we need in those hubs as well. So at the moment, what we're trying to do is to think about how we can give, for example, parents and carers information, because sometimes it's a little bit scary, isn't it? You've had a children's social worker for a really long time, and then you get an adult social worker, there's different legislation and there's different changes, etc. But what we want to do is the same ethos as we want to do with all of our services and community hubs. It's about how we get upstream, how people, how we put ourselves out of a bit of work. People don't need us, because they're being supported in other ways, and that's the success, really. So we will really need to think about that. And that advocacy around young people's, their goals, their aspirations, and some of the metrics that we're starting to capture at the moment. Okay. Oh,
Thank you. Michelle, sorry.
We're going to try not to creak too much.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm David Shaw. I'm the Assistant Director of Education and Achievement. So I'm just going to step you through the report relating to learning and skills and the various different services that includes. I'm not going to read the report verbatim. I'll just pick up some key points. I'm sure you've got questions. So I think first of all to say and celebrate that we've retained some really strong early years provision throughout the county, which is excellent. And it's probably to be noted that we've been asked by the Department of Education to link in with them nationally around the work that we've done here in Shropshire to support their development and the rollout of the expanded childcare offer. Which is, I think, testament to the work that officers have done with the sector on this real challenging area. Our next phase with this, we're certainly not complacent. We don't want to stop any of the good work that we're doing. So whilst we've had a real focus on settings, both PVIs and school-based settings, we're also looking at how we can develop the childminder offer as well. And we think that's really a good opportunity, both in terms of certainly more rural areas, more areas where actually it might need to look and feel different for young people. But also, I think there's a really good connection with some of our short break provision. That might also be supporting some of our disabled children in that space. So again, really good opportunity to expand in that direction. You can see the code validation remains really strong, and we are, continuing to be confident that by September we'll have the provision in place. We continue to monitor that against both national and local indicators. And obviously we're keeping a very close eye to any development of housing and large housing estates that are forthcoming within Shropshire, whether they're currently planned or in development now. I think, interestingly, we've not seen, whether it's early years or statutory school age to young people, we've not seen huge increases in numbers of children coming into Shropshire, which is slightly at odds with the amount of housing that's being developed across the county. And I know that was a question that came up at one of the last scrutiny meetings. What we are seeing is movement around migration around the county, and that's borne out both in terms of the conversations, the informal conversations we're having with housing developers, but also the in-year admissions movement that we're seeing within our primary and secondary spaces. We only brought in-year admissions back into local authority control from September 24. So it's the first year we've seen this level of data to explain some of this movement, which is quite fascinating, really. There doesn't seem to be a particular rhyme or reason in terms of north, central, south, or parts or areas of Shropshire. We're seeing pretty reasonable, consistent movement, primary and secondary. So again, it's quite interesting, this. So we're keeping a very close eye on that. But again, we're not seeing huge growth in pupil numbers. And again, that has an impact on school populations, but also early years provision that we're seeing. What we do see is areas where we may have young people or children early years age on different waiting lists in different nurseries. We've spotted a number of young people in that space, and that's often because that can be the route to a parent going to work or a certain, something that works for them in terms of their social personal life. So it's quite an interesting space we've got into around this. Actually, it's not quite as straightforward as we've got with our school age population. So there are often questions that come up at scrutiny. So we're keeping a very close eye on that. So that's quite interesting in that space. We've got lots of multi-agency work around understanding those emerging needs. What we are certainly seeing is an increasing, whether it's SEND, whether it's early language development, whether it's some challenges around development per se within the early years age range, most definitely. And I'm sure anyone who's involved in early years provision, I can get certain colleagues across the room, will be seeing that also. So we've made some changes this year to the funding formula through Schools Forum to put a greater proportion of funding directly into the main body of the funding that's provided for those settings, because we recognise this isn't just a few young people that need more targeted provision. This is a greater number of young people that actually would benefit from greater intervention at the earliest age. In that way. So that is a positive shift that will start in April in terms of that different funding mechanism, and we can certainly circulate more detailed information via Schools Forum that was approved at the last meeting if that would be of interest. What Andy Nichols has also done in conjunction with the early years advisory team is also look at how we can put a more focused grip and review process around any targeted or specialist support that we provided in terms of funding. So that's, again, that early intervention grant funding, again, will have a little bit of a change to its process, so we can be assured that both the amount of funding that's being provided and the delivery of that is actually making the difference we want to see. So again, we'll be able to provide that into subsequent reports as we move into the new financial year. That's quite interesting, quite a change from previous years, actually. But what that does do, it starts to mirror what is provided in the statutory school age funding levels through the provision of notional SEND funding, which hopefully is useful. You'll have seen within the paper some real positive information around the NEET and the reduction of NEET to young people that are not in education, employment or training, or are not known in terms of where they are and what they're doing. So we are really driving the levels down in Shropshire, and that Jeff Rennick, Joe Brown and the team have done a phenomenal job. So we'll just like to publicly put on the record here, that the numbers are fantastic, but every single number is a young person actually that's now accessing different provision and is back on track in terms of where they are. What we found from the work that they've been doing is different ways we can address that in a more proactive, preventative way. So Jeff, Joe and the team are working on that to, again, look at what they can do to prevent any of those challenges arising for young people as they cross from this academic year into the new academic year in September, which is great. It's exactly what we want them to be doing. We're certainly therefore seeing a greater connection with our post-16 providers, both in county and out of county. We've got a number of those large post-16 providers that sit either in Wales or Staffordshire or Cheshire East, Cheshire West. So again, that information sharing and tracking is really important, because obviously the geography of Shropshire as it is. What we're also looking to do is expand the work that team are doing into a greater focus around SEND and destinations for young people with an education, health and care plan. Again, building on the good work that's taking place and aligning it in a more consistent way. So what we want to see, and we'll be able to report in future reports, is where we look at the destinations for young people with an educational care plan, whether those plans are ceasing at 19, 20, 21, 24, 25. So again, we can be assured of that destination tracking and the connection with supported internships and other programmes like that. Moving on to the virtual school, we've got some really strong outcomes continuing within the virtual school, and Siobhan mentioned the great work that the team have been doing already around participation and engaging with people directly. We've had some wonderful opportunities for young people there to share their views and directly take over. And we mean that in the true sense of the word, in terms of whether it be meetings, conferences, or things. It's just been fantastic. And we're continuing to have a really strong relationship and partnership with Jazan Pafar, who is a national speaker, who is a care experienced adult, and talks just phenomenally passionately about the impact that had on her life and actually what she wants to see change and be different for young people moving forward. So we are trying to work in partnership with Jazz and bring her energy and enthusiasm into Shropshire, and we've got some exciting things that we'll be sharing with schools, colleagues and partners over the next few months, really, that are in training with Jazz. But again, Jazz's philosophy is around to really engage young people. And I think we heard that from the work that Siobhan's doing already. The more we can do to engage young people in this and act upon what they want, I think the better we will see this become. A really good example, which is a little bit beyond Q3, is the work that we did in terms of allowing those young people to set the scene and tone for the celebration event in September. They had that opportunity, it was their event, and they created what that looked like. And actually the flow and feel of the event was wonderful, actually. So we will always try and invite as many elected members as possible. It's always a balance to try and get the family members and the young people themselves there and make it work practically. But any support, if you're interested in attending that, please do let me know, and we'll try and prioritise attendance at the next event. You'll see in terms of the information, we've got our continued focus on PEPs, the personal education plans, and how that links in terms of the young person's educational journey. We obviously don't release any funding, People Premium Plus funding, until PEPs are completed. So again, there's a real close connection in terms of what's planned, what's delivered, and the funding that follows that to support that delivery. We're really proud of the attendance rates that have been achieved, both in the virtual school and across Shropshire, actually. And again, I think there needs to be a recognition that the work that officers but also schools themselves are doing in this space. This is a really, really difficult thing to shift, really. You've heard nationally it's still a really tricky area all across the country, but we're encouraged that we're doing some really good work here in Shropshire. Again, we're not complacent. We've got pockets that are quite stubborn in terms of the areas that we're working on, but again, we're focusing in on that group as necessary, either through the virtual school or through the wider education welfare support teams that we have in place. And you can see there we've still got some work to do talking about NEETs, again bringing expertise and good practice there. So Joe Kelly is also talking with Jeff and Joe in terms of what can we take from some of the wider NEET tracking programs that we've got successful outcomes in. How can we apply that more into the children looked after space as well? But we've just separated out the difference between the unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people and the citizen learners. And there's quite a stark difference when you look at the NEET figures there, which is a real challenge. And one of our greatest issues is around the roll-on, roll-off courses or the lack of them. So essentially what happens is young people arrive throughout the year, and because of the way that the education system is set up, they're just not able to access those courses and then instantly become NEET young people. So what we're looking to do is set up our own internal provision around that to enable them to access some courses, and recruitment's completed around that. So we're setting that programme up ready for the summer term. So again, we'll be able to report to you where we are with that one. But we see that as a way of alleviating some of these practical challenges that we've got currently within this space. Moving then into access to education, again, we're continuing to see a positive reduction in the number of permanent exclusions compared to this time last year. So we're really encouraged, actually. We're at 19 compared with 36 this time last year, which is a significant reduction. Suspensions are also reducing, 7.4% reduction compared to the same period last year. We're also seeing the number of days within those exclusions reduce as well by 18%. So those are positive indicators that the wider support work, the early intervention, the AP inclusion support grants that we provided to schools, particularly secondary schools, during 2024 are started to make a really strong impact. And that's continued into its second year of the pilot programme now, and we've aligned our education quality advisors to evaluate the impact of that and go in and do a visit. So the way the programme works is there's an amount of money that's targeted to a particular school. They say they're going to do X, Y and Z. We have a memorandum of understanding, and the quality advisors will go in and check that is actually happening. Actually, we can see positive outcomes, but we want to get it underneath the evidence almost, really, of what we can share widely and more with other schools where this isn't perhaps as working as positively, and share that practice. So that quality advisor role will allow us to share the best practice and challenge where practice needs to improve further, really, within the space, which is good. So those colleagues have a really clear role in terms of the overall work that's taking place around inclusion, which is absolutely, I think, ahead of where things are nationally in terms of that shift to mainstream and expecting mainstream schools and education settings to provide well for children and people with a greater range of special education needs and disabilities. And that's going to take some time, I think, in terms of embedding, not just in Shropshire, but certainly nationally, because we have a range of expertise, challenges, opportunities within schools and settings. We also have a confidence level that we need to work on with those schools and settings, but also with families, so that there's a trust in terms of that expertise. So families don't just expect special schools to be the only provision that can meet need. We need to build that trust in our SEND hubs and our mainstream schools to be able to do that increasingly, which we are successfully, and we're seeing that come through in terms of outcomes for children, Ofsted inspection reports and outcomes more generally. So we've talked about exclusions, we've talked about, I'll pause there.
Chair, may I ask a question on exclusions? Mm-hmm. Is there a different level of exclusion, permanent exclusion levels between primary and secondary?
Yes, there is.
And also, do you capture any data on trends of young people excluded in primary school and that continues into secondary school? And what do you do about that, really?
No, absolutely. So what you will see at the bottom of the report, we always include an appendix which outlines all of the various different education type indicators and the latest national releases on there. So if you see the appendix related to, so if you look at the appendix, and I'm just finding it now. So page 12, on the appendix, you will see a difference between the suspension rates in primary and suspension rates and similar exclusion rates in secondary. Now, bearing in mind this is the national release, the full year release, we've also, I think it was certainly for this meeting, but I think we also did it for the previous meeting, we've also started to include the termly updates, because what we're starting to see in Shropshire is a greater shift at each term that haven't yet caught up with the overall annual, because it's just the way it's delayed in terms of reporting. But you can still see a difference between primary and secondary. So secondary exclusion and suspensions are higher than primary. So what we see there in terms of the challenges, hence why we focused the AP Inclusion Development Fund on secondary colleagues, because of that particular challenge in that way. And you can see particularly when we look at Shropshire, whether it's all pupils or those different more vulnerable groups, we can see that playing out quite starkly there. Hence why that focus needs to be initially on the secondary areas, which is we're seeing positive impact from that. We're now applying the same methodology and consideration into what we can do for primary schools, and those conversations have started with Education Quality Advisors, John Rowe as the head of Education Quality and Safeguarding within the team, and head teachers themselves actually. And we've got some work that's planned throughout this term, but also into the summer term, around what we can also do around EHCP bandings, and actually how do we promote and take a lead on locally what that can look like to prevent and avoid high need or escalation into special school or more costly independent special school provision. Because if we can put our resources into our state funded schools, whether that's primary, secondary or hubs or special, we have a greater opportunity to change these indicators. So I think there are lots of things we could talk about around this: curriculum, academic versus vocational. All of those different factors will come into play, and this is where it's not just something we can look at in isolation, which is why we're trying to take a broad view of this.
I think that's really good that there's been that intervention in secondary school. But are there young people who are regularly or not suspended in primary school, and then they go, and the same people go on to the suspensions in secondary school? And I know it's difficult to show in a data like that, so I just wonder if there's any opportunity of exception reports and sort of and some of the really examples of targeted work to try and prevent that occurring.
So we can certainly, so we do hold that data. We have, and you're right, it would be a lot more, it would be at individual pupil level in terms of repeat.
And that's difficult in case it identifies people.
Quite. But what we could certainly do is we could certainly put together for the next scrutiny meeting a selection of case studies actually to show the intervention work that's happened in primary and what that's then led to in terms of young people as they transferred into secondary, or even young people in secondary as they've transferred into post-16. And we've got some examples where we've seen young people in early year settings that have been quite dysregulated and had quite interesting challenges. What does that then look like as they move into statutory primary school age? So if I take that as an action to bring some examples back, because we do hold that data, that was one of the biggest changes that we've made within the teams. It's the routine tracking and understanding of that analysis and what that's telling us, which schools, which groups of young people, which areas, parts of the county are we seeing these things in.
I understand it's a serious decision for a school to permanently exclude someone, isn't it? It's it's not a decision taken lightly. So the interventions and the examples of those, I think, are really important for whoever's on this scrutiny committee.
And I think that talks to some of the work that you'll be aware the virtual school has done really successfully in maintaining zero permanent exclusions, and the strategies that have been employed to do that. Part of bringing those teams together in the restructure in 2024 was to share that expertise, and actually what we're starting to see is that level of focus, creativity, different thinking being played through with different groups of young people actually. And I won't now, but I can recall several examples where we've had and Joe and the team have had conversations with senior leaders or head teachers, and often supportive, but at times it's had to be quite challenging actually, because whilst some of those decisions have not been taken lightly, they still may not be the right decision. And actually, and there are wider factors at play, whether that's disability, whether that's contextual family circumstances, that actually could potentially make that exclusion, if challenged, illegal. So what we try to do is provide a safety net for the young person, but also for the school and the governing body as well, actually, if these decisions are challenged. So just moving through in terms of, of course.
Just talking about places and everything. I know Bedstone's closed, and it's not just to do with the VAT. It's it's the.
Indeed.
I don't know about any other schools, but is that causing an impact? Because I am aware that Bedstone had quite a number of SEND children, and obviously it's the south of the county. So I'm just wondering, is that going to have an impact? Are you going to have a higher ratio of children with SEND coming into Ludlow and possibly Bishop's Castle and Church Stretton?
I mean, so we're keeping a very close eye on obviously the Bedstone position, but also the wider changes with any independent schools, whether it's VAT related or other really. So far, and I checked in with Rich Reynolds, our admissions team manager, yesterday on this, we haven't seen a huge influx or change in terms of this. So it's pretty well. It's in line with where we were last year actually. Now, our thinking currently is that we wouldn't necessarily have expected a huge change this academic year. We think if any change will occur, it will be between the academic years in preparation for September. So what we are keeping a close eye on is obviously next week when we get to National Offer Day and sort of think for the secondary. What we have seen previously is we will allocate places to children, people and families. We have always had a number of those that have declined those places because they've chosen to move into the independent sector. So again, we're just considering whether we'll see a reduction in that number that decline places this year. So in a few weeks' time, we'll be able to report back in terms of what that looks like for this round of admissions and whether that is considered. In terms of children and people with SEND or an EHCP, the EHCP team are again keeping a close eye on this, whether there are any changes. We've not seen huge shift from the independent sector currently. What we are trying to do is look at how we can, and are doing this already, create the more places in SEND hubs and support with mainstream and actually enable that provision to be met successfully there. So we've created a number of places. So September last year, we created 48 additional places. If you go back to September 22, between September 22 and where we are now, we've created in the region of 200 additional places. And that's in a combination of opening Keystone, which is 120 places, 48 new hub places that we created from September 24, and we've expanded some of the work with Sevendale, but also with Woodlands in terms of them being able to actually get up to their published admission number in terms of capacity. So that in itself is a huge range of places that have been created over the last 2 years. The challenge we've seen is, as you'll be aware, is demand has hugely increased in terms of just requests for educational health and care needs assessment. And that's been a national position. In Shropshire, it's been, I think, born out of some previous challenges around accepting or not accepting requests for assessment. We've had those conversations and we've discussed that at length in Schools Forum, really. We've almost been in a rebalancing position the last couple of years. And for the first time at the end of last year, we actually saw the numbers of requests dip slightly. So we closed the year on just over 700 requests for assessment, whereas previously it was well over 900, 930, and it was just rising. So it was the first year we saw a slight decline. And we put that down to the rebalancing starting to be rebalanced, but also the wider early intervention prevention work that we've talked about here in terms of the work the virtual school does, the education quality advisors, our education psychology service, our neurodivergent practitioners out and about, really helping schools and families to be confident about meeting needs. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we're moving in that direction in terms of where we go. But certain parts of the county we're keeping a really close eye on that actually, because as you'll be aware, we've got Ludlow, we've got some ideas and development opportunities in and around Ludlow. We've got Cleveland Mortimer and the hubs there at Lakehead. So again, we're just keeping a close eye on what that looks like. Our next phase this year up to the end of summer will be primarily on secondary places. So again, we're supporting that transition from what was previously early years into primary and primary into secondary. And we've got the first start to some conversations with our post-16 FE providers as well in that space. What we want to get is a really strong joined up proposition and provide the financial and educational expertise into those mainstream providers to be able to do that. So one of the areas we've been able to draw down just over £250,000 worth of additional funding from the National Send an AP Change programme, and that will be deployed to use expertise from our special schools to support directly with those outreach teams into schools. Why would we want a child to change their provision from their local school if we can help build that knowledge and expertise? We've got some really good, clear examples where that's worked well. We've also got some where it hasn't worked well, actually, and we need to learn from those examples, and we are doing it in this way.
William, are you getting an increase in homeschooling? I just was doing my surgery, and there was a mother in there talking with a child, and so I just went up to talk to them, and she was homeschooling her daughter, a son.
Indeed. So you'll see 7.54. We've included the snapshot data around elective home education. So we are slightly above the national, but we're actually quite a lot lower than our statistical neighbours, which again is encouraging. What we have seen an increase in requests for elective home education, absolutely. We see a range of reasons for that in terms of not just philosophy, but some dissatisfaction, some wanting to do something different, some changes, some level of not necessarily understanding what actually this is all about and the responsibilities that are clear. Our concerns are more often around this where it's not suitable and perhaps a family is perhaps receiving support from targeted early help or is on a child in need plan or child protection plan. And we've actually done some work with the Safeguarding Partnership and colleagues in child social care around actually being, again, ahead of the game in terms of putting some challenge back and not just accepting where perhaps a young person is subject to a child protection plan. Actually, one of the outcomes from the strategy of the core group meetings could be that this young person needs to go back into school. And then we would use our statutory intervention powers to enforce that. Undoubtedly, there will be challenge around that because the national legislation is not caught up with the ambition that's articulated in the schools and the wellbeing in schools bill yet. But it's the right direction of travel in terms of that. Let's be honest, we're also taking a sensible, pragmatic view on this, where we've got young people that for a reason may be in that situation, but actually there is a really strong education offer within the family. Why would we want to unsettle things? So Sonia and I have talked about this at length. We've got a really good way of monitoring this. We're not just going to go one size fits all and just make this change. We're taking a very child by child view of this because it needs to be considered in that way. But overall, we are seeing increases, but we're wanting to mitigate that as much as possible. We ideally want to see our numbers reduce moving forward. We want children back into school because we do genuinely believe it is the best place for them to be safe, but also enjoy learning.
I'm just conscious of time.
Indeed.
So if we can perhaps take Jeff's question and 2 more minutes, perhaps on EHCP, then David, and then we can, if that's okay, committee, go over to children's social care.
I noticed on NEET, young people not in educational training, for 16 to 17-year-olds in Shropshire, it's only 2.5%. Can we really believe that figure? I mean, it's incredibly low.
We can, because, so if you'd asked me a year, 18 months ago, I would have had the same sceptical response, if I'm honest, Councillor. But we are absolutely confident on those figures because we've got a team that not just connect within the schools and education settings, but they chase down and speak with and engage with directly the young people. So we are finding out the group that are NEET. That was always one that we were pretty good, pretty strong on that one, but that's improved. It was a not known that gave me the greatest concern because you don't know that group. Where are they? Why are they not known? What does that look like? So that ability to understand where a young person's left an institution, who are they, where are they now, and we follow them up directly in that space. So I am absolutely confident in that one. And again, if there's any further detail that people would like to have a more in detail briefing with the team around the processes that they go through, they are absolutely robust.
I'm just wondering how it's been defined. Obviously, a lot of children nowadays go on to university, they go on to colleges, sixth form, etc. But in amongst that, I'm guessing apprenticeships are included as training. Anything else? So what we're saying is only 2.5% of our children leaving school are in no form of formal education.
Employment or training. Yes, and that's the definition. It is education, employment, or training, in terms of a certain amount of hours that they have to complete that they're studying. What you'll be aware of are that I'm sure young people will be engaged on a full-time education course in a college, but may not be in that college every single day. Some colleges, sixth forms, have different views on that. Some make them come in every single day, whether they've got programs or not, and have private study time. All that variability exists, but this is saying we've got 2.5% of young people that are not engaged in anything at all, and it's what we are doing with that group of young people now, and that's the chasing down and working through it.
I think if you went back 40 odd years when I was coming out of school, that percentage would be much higher, something like 30 or 40%. So it's quite a mark.
It's a really good improvement, I think, in terms of that. An opportunity for us to build closer links with our skills teams and actually look at what the next adult opportunities could be in terms of these things. And those conversations have started. Okay, Chair. So conscious of time, so if I just whiz through in terms of where we are, again, in terms of the information around EHCPs, I won't cover all the areas because we've got the detail in there. What we can say is within Q3, we've maintained timeliness of around 56%, 56.2% to be precise, in terms of issuing plans within 20 weeks. Overall, we've seen a positive improvement of, even if a plan has not been issued within 20 weeks, we're seeing an improvement in the timeliness that it is issued within. So December, for example, plans were issued within 24 weeks, and that's an improvement from where we were earlier in the year. We've continued to reduce the number of educational care plans that are not issued for various different reasons, not all within the local authority's control. Sometimes the discussions and debates with families as well, either 30 weeks or 50 weeks, and they are continue to reduce significantly, which is exactly where we want to be. We've not taken the blanket view of we will just simply name a type, which is an option for local authorities to do. And some authorities where they have 99 or 100% timeliness, that is what they do. They do that. They don't name the actual name of the school. They just name a type, whether that's mainstream or special, and that complies with the law. So I suppose it's the balance that we're trying to strike here in terms of meeting an outcome, but also doing the right thing in terms of the family and the young person with stability. So we're on to that. Annual reviews are improving, and the team have been in place now for just over a couple of months. They started mid-December, and they're getting a real grip of the work that's going on. So the next time I produce that graph, it will be on a downward trend rather than a bit of a tweak upward, which is the way it needs to be. We're focused, as we've said in the report, on phase transfers and our most complex vulnerable young people, and we've seen, this is for Q4, so we've seen improvements in that phase transfer work from where we were last year. Got a lot of work to do still with the team. They've just come through a restructure, so we've recruited final interviews are this week. We've got 10.4 vacancies in the team. By April, we will have a strong permanent team, which we've not had for I don't think we've had that since COVID started, actually. So that will make a marked difference in terms of the quality, the connectedness. And again, for the next Scrutiny meeting, we've got a week-by-week checklist now that happens. So again, the contacts with families, all of those things. So I'll include that so you can have sight of that as well, actually.
Thank you very much. Over to Sonia.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sonia Miller. I'm the Assistant Director for Children's Social Care and Safeguarding, and I've got my colleague today with me.
I'm Amanda Both, Davies Manager for Case Management and Court Team.
Okay, so just going through the Q3 performance report for children's social care, we've continued the theme of providing committee with the overview of demand and throughput in children's social care, because obviously that's been an area of focus. So to sort of summarise, we've really sort of looked at the strategic approach to early help in the last 2 to 3 years, really expanding that offer, restructuring it and promoting it widely amongst families. We now have a number of early help hubs as well as a generalised early help offer, with the view to the purpose of that and being the outcome that we want is to see more children coming into early help at the earliest opportunity, and therefore reducing strain and demand on the front door and the more statutory focus. So the report steps you through some of those measures, really. I won't go through it in huge amounts of detail, but just raise some highlights with you. The two measures around the work that comes into the front door, which is contact and referrals. You'll be aware that contact is information that is shared with us and we're either asked for help or information is given to us. And a referral is where the threshold for a concern, a significant harm has been met. And actually what we're then looking at is a statutory intervention. The Q3 in-year data in the report shows that we're tracking below last year's figures, both in contacts and referrals. And obviously in referrals, you get much more variation, but actually the overall figure for the year is below. So now that we've got 3 quarters demonstrating that, and Q4 is also showing that, I can say that I think we're moving towards that. Actually, we're seeing a shift in demand rather than just a response to a new initiative, which obviously you have to be mindful of. This year, we've seen a decrease in referrals, and we're showing that our referral rate per 10,000 is now lower than the statutory statistical neighbour and national averages. So that would show that we are starting to shift that demand through. What you'll also see in the graph at 7.109 is the vast number of additional early help episodes starting. So you can actually see the visual that once from the restructure and implementing that, you can actually see the impact that that's had in terms of the number of families that are accessing that early help offer. Feedback from partners is that it's much easier to access early help, and it's the early help that is offered is much more timely. And the 5 hubs that we've got means that there is that community-based offer for families as well. And there's lots of drop-in work with partners such as health visitors, midwives, etc., going on in those hubs. So the footfall around that sort of non-interventionist early help and support, where do I go to ask somebody, how do I just get some advice, etc., is really significantly increasing. So we're really pleased that we're sort of like seeing that shift and that sort of turning the curve. As I say, the rate of referrals per 10,000 is dropped, and at the moment the in-year figure is 221 children per 10,000, and that's well below the stat neighbour and national average. Section 47 inquiries, those are the investigations that follow a referral for significant harm in, and we've always tracked really very high on Section 47 inquiries because obviously that's been part of our demand. What you'll see in the graph there at the top of page 72 is that we're seeing that variation in Section 47s, but overall the number is starting to kind of track downwards. You'll always see variations. It's so influenced by family size, incidents that happen, school holidays, etc. But generally speaking, we are seeing a general trajectory down. And that's the starting point of complexity coming into the system. If we've got a lot of Section 47s and they go on to be initial child protection conferences and move through the system because they've hit that threshold of harm, that's where you start to see the increase in demand, or what the demand of is around complexity rather than just families need some help and support. The assessment timescales has been a bit of an area of challenge for us this year, and that figure that we report in this report is all assessed social work assessments open to us. So that is the front door assessments, but it's also the social work assessments where, for example, a child might be open to us for 2, 3, 4 years, but we update and refresh those assessments annually as a minimum, or that there's a fresh assessment for a new child protection conference, etc. So it's a very wide-ranging measure if you look at the whole sort of like scope of a social work assessment being completed. That's been an improving trajectory since the autumn. We had a real dip in August over the summer holidays, and I can tell you that in Q4 that trajectory is continuing to improve significantly. Where we have assessments in the front door, so that initial point of assessment, the front door teams consistently perform at over 90% of those assessments being completed within timescales. So that initial kind of look and that initial work with families is very consistently done in a timely way. So moving on to children looked after numbers, People's Overview Committee has had oversight of this for some time now, because obviously following the significant increase at the beginning of COVID, it's been an area of concern for members. We've explored the reasons why we had that very significant increase, and we understand that well. So the work that we're doing to target that and to manage that is targeted and is linked directly to that early help offer, particularly around 0 to 5s. What we're starting to see, and it's moving from a couple of quarters into, hopefully now this is a trend and the right direction of travel, is two things really. One is a reduction in the children coming into care in the first place, but an increase in the number of children who are exiting care in a more timely way. We exit children in a number of ways. Obviously, they become 18, but also whether or not if they're living with extended family, whether they can be subject to a special guardianship order rather than on a full care order to the council, whether we can discharge a full care order, whether they can step back down to go home to families, etc., or whether they have a plan for adoption. So you'll see on 7.119, the rate of children starting is significantly dropped per 10,000, and the rate of children exiting care is increasing. So we're turning that curve as well. So hopefully with the turn at the front door and the turn at the exit, we will start to see that sort of demand really start to kind of track downwards as a trajectory in the coming months and years ahead. There's been a very focused piece of work on trying to progress placement with parents, discharging care orders where children have gone home to live with parents, and we've had that period of time supporting them to be living at home, but also the increase in the special guardianship orders where children are living with connected carers through friends and family placements, reducing their reliance on the local authority moving forward and giving them that family autonomy to continue with family life as normal. The report says 78% of children are within family settings. As of today, it's 80%. And so what we do know there is, from a cost and financial perspective, the value for money that we get is that 80% of our children are living in the family settings, whether that's their own family setting, as in a connected carer, or within a foster family or within an adoptive family. And 89% of our children are subject to a court order. So the court has deemed that the threshold for harm has been met and that those children need local authority intervention. Most of the children that aren't in that 89% are either disabled children where families have asked us for our help and support, and they need some form of residential care, or they are unaccompanied asylum seeking children who come in and are on a Section 20 legal status. Where we've made a huge amount of progress, and it is detailed in the report, is the pre-proceedings work to court, which we call PLO. It's called Public Law Outline, but it's pre-proceedings work and the court proceedings. And the report details from page 74 onwards the increase in work that we've done to try and divert children and families away from the court work, and the significant increase in working with them at that level, but actually then successfully working with them to divert them away from court. And there's been a significant increase in that to date. But also progressing the work through, if you see the table in terms of the court proceedings, and that's the work that Amanda does with her teams, is really trying to move forward in the timeliness of that court proceeding work. That was one of the areas where we knew that we had children kind of stuck in the system for quite some time. And that's been a system approach. That's about the work and the approach that Amanda's had with her managers and progressing those plans and those assessments, but it's also working in partnership with the court and them making much more timely decisions, reducing the number of hearings, etc. but also then we've been part of a national trailblazer through the Department of Education to look at the timeliness of court proceedings, because our court footprint, which covers ourselves, Telford and Wrekin, Walsall, Wolverhampton, Dudley and Sandwell, was one of the lowest performing in the country. So we were working within that context as well. That trailblazer has been very successful in really trying to move our court proceedings through. At the end of Q2, we were the highest performing in that court footprint for the number of families completed within 26 weeks, which is the national target. And we'd moved from 14% in Q1 to 41% in Q2. So you can start to see the impact of that system for the courts really sort of like working, as well as the quality of the casework that Amanda and her team have been doing.
That's a big improvement, isn't it?
It was, yeah, I was really pleased to see that. Because obviously 26 weeks is a long time for a family, you know, it's half a year. And if you're waiting for the court to make a decision about what's happening to your child, that's a long time. And when you get into 52 weeks and 2 years and 2 years plus, which we have had, it's a long, stressful time to be, you know, concerned about what's happening with your children. Caseloads of social workers is also, and I was asked at the last committee meeting to explain a bit more around the generalised data that we provided around the average caseloads for social workers, because obviously that was an issue that was raised by Ofsted in November 23. And what we are seeing is the average caseload starting to come down. So the first graph kind of overlays all of those sort of systems and processes, where we are in the different types of teams. And then the detailed graphs below kind of just lift those lines out so that you can see that there is variation. So the big variation is in your assessment teams, which is where you would expect it to be. In your looked after teams, you would expect a bit more consistency because those children are there for, you know, a much more sort of considered period of time. Where we have seen the big sort of shift is in the case management teams, and Amanda's had that really close oversight of that work and making sure that we are focused and moving it forward and moving it on and transferring it at the point that's right for the child. And that comes hand in hand with the court work that is being completed much more in a timely way. These are average caseloads. So if you were to go and talk to my social workers today, some will tell you that they've got a caseload in line with this. Some will tell you they've got slightly higher. Where we've got teams that have got newly qualified workers, they have a protected caseload. When they come off their first bit of qualification, which is in the last couple of weeks, they have a protected caseload of 10 children, and then it gradually goes up during their first year. So in those teams where there's 2 or 3 or 4 of those workers, the other workers will hold slightly higher. So you will talk to social workers and they will say, well, actually I'm carrying 21, 22, 23. When Ofsted came in November 23, we had workers with 30 children. We haven't got caseloads that high at the moment. They have come down to below 25 really, and we keep a very close eye on them, and we really kind of progress that, and we really try and promote closures happening very quickly, because those are the secret things that can sit on workers' caseload as a number but aren't actually actively being worked. So really focusing in on the timely closure of work when it's necessary to close. That's my summary of the report. I'm really happy to take any questions.
First of all, apologies for missing for an hour to everybody. First, I'm not a regular member of this committee. I'm a regular member of the place, or whatever it's called now, Environment and something or other committee. Can I just say that the quality and detail of this report is very welcome. Don't want to make too many comparisons, but it's great. This. Just 2 questions. One is that as you squeeze down the cases and you're moving people out of the whichever one it was, I think it was the care one, the CLA starting and ceasing, is there any bounce back? Are we getting people sort of returning into the system because of perhaps being squeezed out early? So that's the first question. And the other one is just in terms of presentation, perhaps something to think about, especially if we have a new committee. So you've given us verbally, really helpfully, a comparison with the 23 figure, but these tables all just give us a 1-year picture. And I think perhaps, especially for new people, a slightly longer picture would be useful, especially if there was a benchmark that went back to the last Ofsted or something like that, so that people could see how things have tracked over that period of time rather than just over a 12-month period. Thank you.
There is purpose behind that in this report, and I don't want to sound defensive at all, but because what we're tracking is the impact of the early help transition and the transformation. That's what I'm kind of reporting on. So that's the purpose behind that. But I take your point, and the comparative data is really important. In terms of the returns back in terms of children looked after, our rate of children becoming re-looked after is extremely low. So, in fact, I think this year we've had 2 children come back into care. And I think that that's about the quality of the work that Stepping Stones does with them. It's very intensive, and they remain involved. They don't just go home. They remain involved while the family still needs them. So they could still be involved a year, 18 months down the line at much lower levels, obviously, but where parents need that kind of touch base, they need that reassurance, they need that support. And what we don't do is rush those return homes. So it's very much, is the child ready? Is the parent ready? Is the rest of the family ready for that child to go home? Because obviously it's a very significant shift in dynamics for a family to manage. So the return for children into care is very low. In terms of the other measure, which looks at the same thing, is our re-referral rate, which is in the report. And we have very, very low re-referrals in both into the early help space and at the initial contact space.
Thank you, Chair. It's really positive to see that, the positive improvements that are being made, and particularly around the number of cases that are being held by social workers. I'm just interested in how the recruitment is going for qualified social workers.
Are the
recruitment
for qualified social workers? We are making progress, Ruth. And you've caught me on the hop. I think it's about 5, if not 6, in the last 3 months, new social workers with experience, and that's the big thing for us. We don't struggle to get the newly qualified at all. That we've had lots this year of newly qualified, and we call them ASYEs, assisted and supported year in employment. There's about 12 or 14 of those, I think, this year through the year. But the experienced social workers has been, as you know, through Improvement Board, much more tricky. But I think there's about 6 in the last 3 months, and there's, I think, another 2. I'm guessing slightly off the top of my head, but I can actually get you the specific figures to be very clear. But we have made good progress in that, to the point of in the assessment teams, we're fully staffed. When we've got a new social worker starting in the next week or so, so that we will then be fully staffed.
Good, thank you.
That's good news, isn't it?
Just in those 2 teams. We're starting to see that. It's not yet kind of coming through, because obviously when you've got newly qualified social workers, you need to maintain some of the consistency to sort of maintain the oversight. But I'm hopeful that we're going to really start to see that come down. So my independent reviewing team is fully appointed too. We've got no agency staff in there, and we've got the assessment team as well, that hopefully within the next couple of weeks will be in that same position. So we're starting to see that movement. We won't ever be in a position of having no agency staff, because it just doesn't happen, but certainly we need to be less than where we're at. We're in that slight tipping point at the moment where I've got a number of agency staff who are A, exceptionally good, and B, have been with us a long time, and then you get into disrupting children's relationships and all of that kind of thing as well. But slowly, step by step, we are, I think, hopefully turning the curve there as well.
Okay, more questions? Excellent report. All of you. Really good positive news. I mean, we know we've got a good team here in Shropshire. It's nice to have it here now. I think there's been 1 or 2 things come out of the conversation that we can take forward, because that's what it's the request from that one. Item 8 then is the work programme.
Thank you. So as Peggy's already said, this is the last meeting of the committee before the local elections, and therefore provides an opportunity for the committee to highlight any topics that you'd want to recommend for the new committee to consider in the future. As has already been discussed this morning and agreed, that the committee feels it would be valuable for the children's participation and impact strategy to be shared with the new committee in terms of their information and understanding as they come on board. help my laptop just turned off. Also, in terms of the performance reports going forward, that inclusion of some information around the disabled facilities grant and the exclusion intervention and the impact examples of those to be included. And then, in addition, other committees have suggested that the work they've already undertaken in their previous years be forwarded to the new committee to inform them of what they have done, so that that work is understood, again, to give that context and understanding, and then anything that still then requires further work they're aware of and can be continued. So it's just to sort of think as a committee of any other areas, and if you'd like to take that approach as well. All right.
I think need to really keep focus on the dementia as well. I think I don't know what Ruth, that's something
Natalie talked about it, didn't she?
They did talk about it, but I just feel that it is something that's increasing in Shropshire, and it's important that we do keep it as a focus and that keep on the ball.
Yes.
I think because the development of hubs seems to be such a key element within the direction of travel, just really understanding what a hub is, what it looks like. It may be that it's a briefing for all members actually in the new council to understand that, but then also to track, you know, where they're working well, where maybe they're not, they need further development.
Yeah.
It was the same area actually. It's the family and community hubs, and they're slow spread across the county, and in particular where we've got a black hole at the moment in the north of the county with no hubs, how we're going to drive them forward.
Yes, Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need something around the blue badge process and the timescales for blue badges. I mean, it underpins both adults and young people being able to be independent and access their communities. And I'm hearing of a lot of delays from people I'm talking to, waiting 3 months in some instances for their blue badge, and as a result being stranded at home because they can't get out. And I think it's really important as part of a prevention agenda for adults and children, actually.
Okay. What all that? Well,
early help and the impact it's had in terms of all the figures that's been shown. I think the new group would be interested to hear that.
So we've captured all those, and as agreed, if that's okay with the committee, we'll also make sure all the previous work is forwarded on, so there's that context to develop upon.
Right, me for the last words. Can I thank all you guys? The report, as Julian said, the reports we've had, you've never had anything. You've come to us totally honest, and I think we all appreciate that, don't we? You've answered the questions throughout the time, and you've been great support to me, especially this one. And to you guys, you come and you ask them, you know, I think we put them through it sometimes, some of the questions we've been asking them. You like, and for the other councillors that have been here before, but I think we've always tried to keep it sociable. Question you without nagging at you. So all the best for the next committee, whoever they may be, but you guys keep up your good work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lee.